Ready to have your mind blown? These 11 facts look like a real glitch in the matrix that defies logic. Fact 1. A girl moves from a small town to a regional capital, rents an apartment on the outskirts, starts a new job, and quickly bonds with her coworkers. One guy lives in the same area, so they often ride home together. One day they decide to stop by her place for tea. He steps inside and freezes. He's been in this apartment before. It turns out his aunt used to live there. They start comparing details, and it gets even stranger. His aunt moved out just a week before the girl moved in. Then another layer clicks into place. The girl remembers that as a child, she often visited her grandmother in that same city. Her grandmother lived on the next street. The guy pulls out a photo album, and it turns out his aunt and the girl's grandmother were neighbors and knew each other well, meaning the two of them could have seen each other as kids without realizing it. And years later, the girl ends up in that exact apartment, and they randomly get hired at the same company. Fact 2. From insurance archives. In 1975, on the Bermuda Islands, a moped rider is killed after being hit by a taxi. Tragic, but it looks like a normal accident. Exactly 1 year later, in 1976, it happens again, down to the details. His brother dies, riding the very same moped on the very same street. He's hit by the exact same taxi, with the same driver behind the wheel. And the creepiest part, the passenger in the back seat is the same person as the year before. The driver was arrested, but the real question is how this could even line up. No one was planning an anniversary. No one was aiming to be in that spot at that time. The tragedy simply repeated itself perfectly 365 days later. Fact 3. A modern case from medical archives. Two brothers were born in the same hospital 3 years apart. They grew up, moved to different cities, and lived completely different lives. When the older brother turned 53, he was in a car crash and was taken to the same hospital where he'd been born. Doctors fought for his life, but he died in intensive care. The younger brother, living in another state, didn't even know it had happened. Exactly 3 years later, on the same date, the younger brother gets into a car accident in his own city. He's rushed by helicopter to the best hospital in the region, and it's the very same hospital where he was born and where his brother died. Doctors try to save him, but he dies in the same ICU, in the very same bed where the older brother passed away 3 years earlier. And one last chilling detail. The paperwork for both brothers was filled out by the same nurse. Later, she said it was the most disturbing déjà vu of her entire career. Fact 4. A story about an Italian mathematician who seemed to be haunted by the number 8. The professor was obsessed with it and treated it like a personal talisman. He was born on August 8, 1888. 1888. As a child, an accident left him with 8 fingers on his hands. He married at 28. After that, his life kept circling back to 8s, 8 students, lectures in room number 8, an office on the 8th floor. He planned to live to 88, but he died at 64. 8 times 8. A. Heart attack, struck on December 8, 1952. His death was pronounced at 8:00 p.m. There were 88 people at his funeral. He was buried in plot number 8 at the cemetery. 8 followed him his whole life, and it's as if it decided to place the final period exactly when 8 times 8 equals 64. Coincidence? Or something more? Fact 5. 1960s Bulgaria. A man wins a large lottery prize with the ticket numbers 0926 303 359. Celebration, joy, the feeling that life has finally turned in his favor. But a few years later, he dies in a tragic car accident. And that could have been the end of the story, if not for what came next. 10 years later, his son, unaware of his father's win, buys a lottery ticket and hits the jackpot with the exact same numbers, 0926 303 359. The odds of such a coincidence are almost non-existent, yet it happens. A few years later, the son also dies in a car accident. Relatives called the numbers cursed. Mathematicians estimated the probability of such a repeat at about 1 in 300 billion. Fact 6. 1930s, Europe. A wealthy businessman buys a luxury car. A year later, he dies in an accident, and the car is sold. The second owner survives 8 months and also dies in a crash. The third lasts half a year. The fourth doesn't die in an accident. He is crushed by the same car while repairing it in his garage. The fifth owner replaces all the parts and repaints the car, but 3 months later, he is killed in a crash as well. Over 12 years, the car changes hands 17 times. 14 of the owners die. 3 manage to sell it after becoming frightened by the chain of deaths. Eventually, the authorities confiscate the car and send it to a scrapyard. When workers try to crush it with a press, the press breaks and one worker is injured. In the end, the car is dismantled by hand and melted down. Engineers find no mechanical defects, just a vehicle that seemed to eliminate its owners. Fact 7. A well-off family from Germany orders a family portrait from a popular photographer. Everyone dresses up, lines up in front of the camera, the photo is developed, and people are shocked. In the image, a clear silhouette of a coffin appears behind the family's young daughter. There was no coffin in the studio. The photographer insists it's a film defect. The family demands another photo, and on the second image, the silhouette is even clearer. A month later, the girl falls ill with pneumonia and dies. The family keeps the photographs as proof of a warning. Skeptics point to a technical flaw, but the question remains, why did this defect appear twice, behind the same girl who soon died, and not behind anyone else? Fact 8. September 11, 2001, New York. An employee of a financial company is supposed to be at his office in the World Trade Center by 8:30 a.m. But his 3-year-old son throws a tantrum and refuses to go to daycare. The father is delayed by an hour, and because of that small interruption, he is not in the building when the plane hits. All of his co-workers who were in the office at that moment die. He survives. And there are dozens of stories like this from that day. One person spills coffee on a shirt and goes home to change. Another misses a bus. Someone gets stuck in an elevator in a nearby building. People who should have died are saved by tiny accidents. Coincidence? Or the hand of fate? Fact 9. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima. An atomic bomb is dropped on the city. Among the survivors is a Catholic monk. He was inside a monastery 3 kilometers from the epicenter, suffered burns, but stayed alive. What follows sounds almost unreal. 3 days later, on August 9th, the monk decides to visit friends in Nagasaki. He arrives at the exact moment when a second atomic bomb is dropped on the city, and he survives again. This monk became one of the very few people with documented proof of surviving both atomic bombings. 2 cities, 2 bombs, 3 days apart, and survival twice. Fact 10. Detroit, USA, 1930 to 1975. In 1930, a man named Joseph Figlock is calmly walking down the street when a baby suddenly falls from a window above. The child lands directly on Figlock. Both survive with only minor injuries. Exactly 1 year later, in 1931, Figlock is walking down the same street again, and once more, a baby falls from a window. The same child, from the same apartment, lands directly on Joseph Figlock. Again, both survive. The story reaches its peak in 1975, 44 years later. Figlock, now an elderly man, is walking in the same neighborhood when another child falls from a window, the grandson of that original baby. Once again, the child lands on Figlock. Both survive. 3 generations, 3 falls, and the same man standing where the odds should have been 0. Figlock was later nicknamed the Guardian Angel. Fact 11. 1930s. A British detective writer publishes a novel about a murder, describing an elaborate method of poisoning with a rare toxin. The book becomes a bestseller. 2 years later, the writer is found dead in his own home. The autopsy reveals that he was poisoned using the exact same toxin and the exact same method described in his novel. The investigation concludes that the killer had read the book and used the author's own idea to murder him. In the end, the writer unknowingly wrote a manual for his own killer, an eerie coincidence that feels like the cruelest irony of fate.